Okay, Dave, we're live. We should be live on LinkedIn right now.
We are. Great.
Yeah, awesome. My name is Adam Nelson. I'm here with Tech Ties and Human Vibes. I'm with Dave Sobel, and he is the host of the Business of Tech podcast. If you've never heard of him, now you have. If you have heard of him, he's doing some pretty amazing stuff. Dave, you want to jump in and share kind of some of the stuff you've done and some of the stuff you're doing?
Well, sure. And thanks for having me, and welcome to my own audience who I'm simulcasting on YouTube and LinkedIn today as well to do it. So I am Dave Sobel. I'm the host of the Business of Tech podcast. I do a daily 10-minute show covering news and commentary for IT service providers. And I've been doing it about 5 years now. I'm a former MSP, former vendor person. So I've been kind of on both sides of delivering IT services. And now I run this podcast, and I spend a lot of time thinking about what solution providers, IT services companies need. And my segment is always, why do we care? To put stories into context. And it's been a great 5-year run, and I'm really excited about the ability to impact that. But I'm always thinking about, like, what more can I do and more can I reach out to? And so, like, for those that are kind of thinking about this, I've said, well, how can I reach more audiences? And actually, the interesting thing that we're here to talk about is I am now launching in Spanish.
Exactly.
That I'm taking a bunch of my content, particularly all my news shows, and I am launching them in Spanish. For those that don't speak English, particularly here in the U.S., there's a lot of other countries as well, particularly in Latin America, where this would be a really useful resource to get for IT services providers and MSPs. Their content, this content in Spanish.
So you're doing all of your new shows, none of your older shows, because the stuff that you talk about is current. Is that correct?
Correct. Now, I've got a few editorial pieces that some of my most popular editorial pieces, particularly my stuff around starting an MSP and launching it, I'm going to be converting some of those to make them available as well. But the main focus is the news show. So I've got actually the past 2 weeks are already available in Spanish now. It's an ongoing thing. I'm launching all of the new news shows going forward. Will all also be in Spanish. They're on their own feeds. They're on their own feeds, so that it's a dedicated YouTube channel and a dedicated podcast feed. So if you're an English language listener, please stick with me on English. Like, that's the way to do it. But if you know someone, or you've got employees that speak Spanish, and it's their primary language, and you prefer to get the content in Spanish, there's a separate set of feeds now available for that.
Very nice. Very nice. Now, you brought a segment with you that
I did. I thought it would be fun for people to get a sense of what the show looks like when delivered in Spanish.
Well, let me bring that up right now. Dave, just stand by.
Microsoft ha refutado las alegaciones de que recopila datos de sus aplicaciones de Microsoft 365 como Word y Excel para el entrenamiento de inteligencia artificial. Esta declaración sigue a una publicación viral en Tumblr que dice que la empresa usó experiencias conectadas para recopilar datos de usuarios. Un portavoz de Microsoft aclaró que los datos de los clientes no se utilizan para entrenar modelos de lenguaje grandes y enfatizó que la función de experiencias conectadas, disponible desde abril de 2019, está diseñada para mejorar la productividad con herramientas como sugerencias gramaticales en tiempo real y coautoría. Los usuarios pueden elegir activar o desactivar esta función dentro de la configuración de sus aplicaciones de Office. La empresa aseguró a los clientes que tienen control total sobre la configuración de privacidad de sus datos.
Well, I'll tell you, Dave, that was great, but I don't know what you said.
Well, here's the amusing bit. Neither do I, except for the fact that I wrote the script. And I think this is what's also intriguing about this is that, so I produce my content. Everything is all written and scripted and very tight. You can see that I've got a very particular style of the way that I deliver things. But I'm actually using artificial intelligence to do the translation, but most notably to do the voice translation. I've spent some time getting my voice encoded by 11 Labs to do that, and I'm using a technology where they actually will translate my voice and regenerate the video. So that's my original English video, then put through and translated to also delivered not only in my voice but in Spanish and made to look correct in terms of the video.
Unbelievable. The mouth was so perfect. I looked at I couldn't take my eyes off the mouth as it was going. I was like, now I'm going to find an error, but I couldn't find one. It was perfect.
It's pretty fantastic. And of course it's still a translation. So I'm careful of always saying, like, look, it's a translation, and we know that certain subtleties to language may get lost in that. But I think it's well into the category, because I've had Spanish speakers listen to it and go, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. Like I get exactly what you're talking about. And it doesn't hurt that I'm speaking in a news tight delivered style. So it's much easier for the translation to get that accurate, because I'm not using a bunch of slang. I'm not using off words. It ends up being a very smooth translation.
So have you launched this yet?
I have. It's so this is all my so as I said, my last 2 weeks of content are all available now, both on YouTube in a separate channel and as a dedicated podcast feed. You're searching for El Negocio de la Tecnología, which is the business of tech, translated into Spanish.
Okay. So how do you deal with comments on the YouTube channel?
So there's two bits that I do. So first off, I've made sure to label everything that I do with AI is labeled as such. I think that's really important. So in the descriptions for the show, both on the audio and the video side, I'm very clearly designating when I use AI, because I think that's important to let people know that. And so I also then have set an expectation with my audience that, hey, I'm doing that. I'm interacting with comments in Spanish. So my actual approach there is that I'm going to do dual language, both my original English as well as the Spanish translation. In this, the way that I'm approaching commenting there. So people will comment, ask me questions in Spanish in comments. I am responding in English with the Spanish translation. That way they've got source too.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
I think it makes, again, it's all about being authentic and not hiding anything. We can totally, I think these tools are absolutely to be used exactly for things like this, to get larger reach and make yourself available to communities that you may not be able to reach. But I don't think there's any value in hiding. I should not hide the fact that despite 3 years of high school Spanish and a year of college Spanish, I'm really kind of useless. Like I feel like I should not hide that from the audience.
Yeah. Wow. That is great. So let's back up a little bit, Dave, if you don't mind. We'll back all the way up to, you said you were an MSP at one time. You said you were a vendor at one time. What made you make the jump from that world to going in the podcast world to provide information for vendors and MSPs? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I was a MSP for a decade, and I led vendor channel programs for another 8 years. And I'm all about finding open spaces in the market. So for me, it was, I said, I think I can deliver education and outreach better, faster, easier digitally. Then, I had spent 8 years as a vendor flying around. The conference circuit is great. People live on it. It's actually the minority. 52% of MSPs don't attend any events at all.
Really?
Yeah, really. So this for me, there was a fascinating bit. And I sort of looked and I said, well, what about that half? And by the way, that's the ones that just don't attend at all, much less the ones that can also do digital. And I said, you know what? I think there's an opportunity to do digital really, really well. So I leaned into it, and here I am 5 years later.
I think that is amazing. And okay, so you've done podcasts for 5 years for the English speaking community.
Yep. What
made you switch? What trigger went off in your head and said, hey, wait a second, there's another community out there I'm not reaching?
It was a little bit of me playing with the technology and discovering that this was kind of a thing I could do. I have always looked at my content and said, how can I reach the most people in the most ways? And generally, it's like, for example, I am make sure that I'm active outside of the US just broadly. I track my rankings outside the US. I make sure that I'm connected to those communities. I've done business internationally before. I helped launch peer groups in Europe, for example. So I'm really familiar with doing business in the UK and in Germany and in France and Spain. And so I always kind of have this eye to what are the other markets.
Yeah.
And in this case, it was I've always said, hey, the more I can do to put my content into as many communities as possible, that's the secret to some of the secret to my success. And by the way, I would tell everyone, do this, it works. And so for me, it was I've constantly been looking at how I can use technology to do the reach. I don't mind saying there's a ton of AI that helps me with what I do, and it helps me with summarization, it helps me with organization, it helps me with interview prep, it helps me with tons of little bits, right? And I have always had this thought of, well, can I use it? For example, I might need a backup one day. Heaven forbid I get really sick for a week. I'm a really small business and I need to put out content. What would I do in that circumstance? So I've always been watching the voice generation space to think well, will this be useful? And then when it was well, wait a second, they offer translation as part of this. It was ding, 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 ding. I think I could do something here.
So how do you keep your content relevant for both groups? So I'm assuming your content is US based content, or is it globally?
So, my take on it is that I don't mind. I say my content is from my area of expertise. And
Okay.
what I say is that the value of what I'm doing is that I have a decade more of experience running an MSP, more than almost a decade of being a vendor, 25 plus years of IT services delivery. I'm a student of this space and I read everything, which, by the way, most providers don't have time to do.
Yeah.
I sort of smile and go, I do a 10-minute show. It takes 3 hours to put together a 10-minute show every day. Most MSPs don't have 3 hours to do that much research, reading, compilation, considering. And I think the value is that I bring expertise and curation, and I offer that. And so, thus, the value is not, hey, I'm focusing on US news. It's I have a lens of delivering IT services and MSP services that I think about, live, breathe, love, and I think about that all the time. And I'm going to offer that to the community to take that information and do stuff with it in their business. And I think that lens translates to lots of different spaces. If you understand my perspective and where I'm coming from, you might be, let's say, a Spanish speaker in Spain, right? And you might say, you know what? Not everything he talks about is completely relevant to me. But by the way, that's true for almost everything, right? I'm probably going to choose stories that aren't relevant to a US provider in a certain market that I might go, you know what? That doesn't quite fit me, but I like to learn a little bit about that. Or I don't have to be perfect every single time. I have to deliver more value than I take up, and I take up 10 minutes of your day. So I've got to deliver more than 10 minutes worth of value every single day.
Man, I love it. I absolutely love that technology. Okay, Dave, we know that you were a vendor. We know that you were an MSP at one point. Now you're this huge, famous podcaster. And what's next? Oh, and you converted everything over to Spanish, so you're going that route as well. What's next for Dave?
Be good at this. So I sort of smile. I sort of smile and say, I don't think of it quite that way. I think about it as continuing to do the best job that I can and being a little bit better every single day than I was the day before. I go back and I listened to a couple of the early episodes, and I'm just sort of, wow, that was way rougher. I mean, it's harder to listen to, and I wasn't as thoughtful on certain bits, and my research wasn't as good, and my prep wasn't as good. And it's about how can I be better at this every single day and just deliver a little bit more value. It's sort of, I lever a lot the go-giver principle, the idea of delivering a lot more value than you cost. And if I also then iterate to deliver more value every single day, then over the period of time, it just gets way better. When the show launched, it was, roughly only about 5 minutes, right? And it's expanded to 10 because I'm like way better at researching. Like I'm way better at researching, and I need to give a little bit more context for the story to make sense. And I've learned that my writing had to expand to get the story right and be more valuable. And so it's like it morphs a little bit over time. But I think what I'm producing now is significantly higher quality than I did 5 years ago, for example.
So I'm on Spotify, my Apple whatever podcast. Where do I find you?
So search, if you're in English, search for The Business of Tech. I will come that up. All of my shows are linked at businessof.tech on the website. If you're looking now for the Spanish version, look for that in Spanish. El Negocio de la Tecnológica, right? So The Business of Tech in Spanish. Available on all the podcast platforms. You can also find all the shows that I'm involved with at mspradio.com.
Okay, nice. Now, I'd like to ask one question here before we go. Are you a book reader?
I am an avid book reader.
What's the number one book that's changed your life?
So that's a hard question. Probably it's probably got to be the E-Myth. And
now I'm on that actually right
now. I'm a little old school on that. I like, there's all the new stuff that, comes out in terms of, the EOS stuff and traction. And I mean, I always laugh and go like, so E-Myth is kind of not in vogue anymore. But it was the business book that defined process for me. And I still reference it all the time because it really shaped my process. We were talking beforehand about my sort of focus on process and the fact that I make sure that I don't build systems that have two forks because it causes problems for me on speed. Like that's something I learned based on E-Myth. And so for me, that's that book.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know a guy, he preaches E-Myth. And so I have downloaded it. I have yet to finish it, but I have downloaded it. It is on my stuff to do before the end of the year. So yeah.
Yep. So by the way, we've got commenters. So I want to make sure Bill asked what the question was or what the book name was. It's called The E-Myth or The E-Myth Revisited is the book in question. And by the way, Bill, you did ask earlier, can the content be delivered slower? I know I'm fast. It's my natural speed. My answer to that actually is both in YouTube and podcasts, you control the speed of the speaker. You can change the setting to make me 0.75 if you want to hear me a little bit slower. You can make me 0.4 if you're one of those additional fast listeners. So I want to make sure so my take has been, I just am me, and I let you control the speed you want to hear me at.
That is very good. That is because to me it was very fast, but whenever you speak another language, it's always fast to me.
Well, fair. But by the way, I'm a fast talker in English. I'm constantly I use those. I use AI tools for a bunch of different things, and one of them is words per minute speed, and it's constantly warning me that I'm a little too fast.
Well, Dave, I would like to thank you for coming out, taking some time out of your day to join us here on Tech Ties and Human Vibes, and I definitely want you to come back because there's some other things I want to talk to you about.
Anytime, I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I hope you have a good day.
You too.
All righty. Bye.